Yeah, thank you. I hope everybody can hear me.
Absolutely superb. And we've got the slides up as well, Bit. So over to you. Thank you very much.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate it. It's a great opportunity for me to address each and every one of you today. And let me see, I'm going to try to share my screen, or I should say share my video anyway. And so, hey, topic of discussion today is connecting the dots for digital transformation. So for many of you that are, have been involved in obviously knowledge management in the service desk industry, I mean, there are a ton of buzzwords out there right now about what is digital transformation. And what I would like to just share with you a little bit today is a little bit about our journey, what we've done. So I'm going to talk to you about what I believe is the digital experience, some of the challenges I think that leaders actually are presented with in terms of how they are managing through digital transformation, and then ultimately give you a view of what our tenets and our guidelines are in terms of how we make decisions on this roadmap. And then finally, I'll give you an opportunity to see some of the outcomes that we've gotten through our original show. So just a couple of points for you to contemplate here as we get started. But April 2020, IDC put out a report talking about data. And so there are major barriers to data. And in fact, only about 60, or actually 32% of data that is collected is really only utilized in the enterprise environment. So the other 68% of that data actually goes unused. It's collected and it's stored, but it's not managed and then utilized in terms of its full potential. So what are some of the barriers associated with that? It's not collected in the right place. It's not stored properly. It certainly isn't categorized or cataloged so that it can be findable and searchable and ultimately presented as relevant information. And I think the last thing that's interesting from that standpoint is actually most of us store data in silos. So we never connect the data between the silos. So how do you think about this digital experience? So I'll get into this, and this is kind of a framework in terms of how we think about the digital experience. But before I get there, I want to talk also about what's happening in terms of that explosion of data. So we're seeing, in our perspective, the explosion of 5G. We're seeing a movement to what we call edge computing, or the Internet of Things, and also the fact that we are moving from mainly public clouds to hybrid clouds. And the fact that we're moving to 5G and Internet of Things pushes a lot of compute power actually to the edge. And because of that explosion in the Internet of Things, there's going to be billions of devices in the next 5 years. The amount of decisions that have to be made are going to just grow immensely, very similar to what you're going to see in the data storage and how much data and information is created. So in that digital experience, what we look at basically customers come to Dell for kind of three reasons. They want to buy something, they want to learn something, or they want to solve something. And that all begins with search. And so for us to help a customer complete their overall task or their intent of coming and engaging with Dell, we have to be able to answer those queries and answer those questions and help them get the information that they need, again, to buy something or learn something or actually solve a problem. So you can see some of our core tenets around there, around unified search, content management, change management, which is extremely important, single source of truth, and governed systems. Now, the diagram here really is actually pretty important in terms of how we view it. You can see that this is our digital ecosystem. We have change management in there, and we have systems management in there. And the main point of that is, if you're thinking about where your data is, how it's categorized, how it's stored, where it's stored, how it's put together, the most important thing is if it's not in your ecosystem and it's not being actively managed, you'll have a pretty hard time actually starting to get onto the roadmap and into the conversion of your digital transformation. And so if you think about the number of decisions that are having to be made, the advent of AI and machine learning and things like that are really starting to become more prevalent in our industry, having data stored that is not actually in a managed state is one of the telltale signs of failure as you start to think about things in the future. And so we look at things, everything for us starts with search. And at the end of the day, we want to be able to understand what search means. and understand the navigation that our customers are on, the analytics, the tools and the systems. And then we ultimately want to make sure that all of this is these other capabilities are really wrapped around our content repositories and containers. And one of the things that is so important, and if you think about what content is, particularly in the relation of knowledge, I would say the majority of people actually think of knowledge management in KCS in terms of two things. It's articles and videos. Well, actually content is multidimensional. And so for us, we have content that's created by our sales, our marketing, our support teams, our deployment teams, and our product engineering teams. And that content is also created in articles, it's created in videos, it's created in pictures and images and white papers and other diagrams and whatnot. And it's also created to serve different personas. So a phone agent versus a field agent versus a customer versus a partner, you have various different types of content that are created for a variety of reasons. And if you're not very intentful in terms of how that content's created and structured through things like taxonomies and ontologies, what your language strategy is, how you're applying natural language processing, which enables some of your unified search capabilities, it makes it very difficult for you to surface the information that is ultimately relevant and helps customers complete the purpose of their visit. And so you can see on the right-hand side what we do in terms of managing or measuring that ecosystem is really around 5 individual measures. We want to know the customer satisfaction. We want to know resolve in X, that is, did you have to call more than once? Did we have to dispatch something more than once? Did you have to engage in more than one channel? We also want to know what the return on the investment is. How much cost did we expend to actually resolve that issue? And the ultimate 2 measures for us are at the bottom: completion of purpose. Did the customer or the end user and stakeholder, did they actually complete the intent of their visit? And then the last one is the customer effort score. How many clicks? How many channels? How much time did you have to spend? And so those are extremely important for us as we look at the evaluation of how all of this ecosystem comes together across the multiple channels for our customers. And so you can see the outcomes that we're looking at. We want to have the ability to do personalization at scale, seamless, intuitive, frictionless, and adaptive. So we want to have the ability, if we structure our content and our customer journeys properly, we can actually fluidly guide customers in one place or another, or one channel to another, and then make sure that if they're in a mobile device or they're on a desktop, we have the ability to make sure that those interactions are actually fully adaptive. So now from a leadership perspective, if you think about this is our digital ecosystem. So I'll talk a little bit about what's happening from a business point of view and from a leadership perspective. And so the way we look at it from a leadership point of view, just given the speed of the transformation that we're at today, leaders have to really be able to do 2 things. Number one, they have to be able to run the business. So the day in, the day out, the things that are actually happening, close to the customers, close to your partners and your end users, those are extremely, extremely important. And you have to execute on the day-to-day if you're ultimately going to be successful in the future. But at the same time, you have to be now, particularly as it relates to digital transformation, you need to be focused also on transforming your business. And you have to be able, as a leader and as a business owner, be able to do 2 things at once. And so going back to this concept of explosion of data and with 5G, IoT, edge computing, et cetera, there is no way that it is humanly possible for our current construct of whether it's a service desk or whether it's field engineers or phone support people, whatever it is, it's not physically possible for us in the future to be able to keep up with the number of decisions that are going to have to be made in seconds, minutes, and hours versus days, weeks, and months. And so the important piece in terms of running the business versus transforming the business is, again, getting into the concept of digital transformation. What is your artificial intelligence strategy? What is your content strategy? How are you utilizing these things to take out less value or unvalued work and moving it into a more automated fashion? The faster you're able to move this unvalued work into an automated capability, number one, it helps you become much more competitive. And quite honestly, companies that aren't focused on AI and machine learning and specifically managing and structuring their content so that they can scale those things are going to find it harder and harder to become competitive, I think, in the future. As companies start to transform through the applications of those types of technologies, they're actually going to take their cost per transaction down so significantly that it's going to create savings opportunities and opportunities to invest and innovate in the future. And so you can see we'll talk about this here in just a second on the next slide, but kind of the 4 key success metrics for us are really around customer NPS, our employee NPS, financial aspects, and then ultimately share gains. And so now I'm going to transition a little bit into what we're talking about in terms of our overall vision and some of the business strategies that we're focused on. Just real quickly, as you kind of read the vision, ultimately our job is to provide our customers industry-leading digital services through emerging technologies and methodologies. I talked about the outcomes that we're focused on. Number 1 is operational excellence, so thinking about how we become more efficient and leaning out our organization. The second one is our customer NPS, and what's also extremely important for us is the employee NPS. So if you're creating these capabilities and these technologies and you're getting them integrated into your processes, if your teams aren't using them and taking full advantage of them, then ultimately you're not going to be able to provide a great customer experience, and you certainly won't be able to lean out your organization and start driving those cost and competitive advantages. If you do these first 2 outcomes, if you do them very well, what that starts to do, again, it takes your cost per transaction down, certainly drives a higher level of loyalty with your customers and your employees, and it creates room and dollars for you to reinvest in the innovation engine that is going to be so important here. And if you're innovating faster than your competition, it's going to create a market advantage and a competitive advantage in your current set of your business. So this is, as I was saying, this is kind of these are the outcomes that we're focused on. Now, as you think about our business or our strategic objectives, we look at our strategic objectives really in kind of 6 different areas. First is we want to always employ industry best practices. So I heard the poll mentioned earlier. KCS is an industry best practice for us. And we're in the process, we're in year 3 of what I would call a 5-year journey. It's extremely important for us to continue to deploy, refine, and utilize our KCS practices and methodologies in order to drive improvements in the business. We want to make sure that those processes are also embedded into our technology strategy. And we want to use our process and industry capabilities really to influence where and how technology is invested in so that we can take advantage of cutting edge capabilities. And then we obviously want to measure those KPIs, et cetera, through industry standards and make sure that we're setting targets, accountability, and then driving continuous improvement. Those are kind of 3 basic strategic objectives, and I think the bottom 3 are probably more important than the top 3 in a lot of cases. Number 4, cultural evolution. One of the big challenges for us in this concept of knowledge management, and specifically KCS, and I'm sure many of you in the service desk industry can understand, the value a lot of times that employees feel that are on the front lines is really about what they know. It's not about what they share. And so we've had to go about a massive cultural shift and going from knowledge hoarding to knowledge sharing. And so how do you create that as part of the overall job description? How do you create kind of an energy and an award system for people that are actually sharing knowledge and sharing capabilities that allow you to take advantage of new technologies like AI and ML? And then making sure that is not only just, it's measured at the frontline level, but it's celebrated at multiple levels within the organization. And so we've gone from what I would say is a meritocracy about how well you compete against your peers to more of a team-based perspective in terms of what are you doing to help the team, the organization, our customers, and helping us to meet our goals around these business outcomes. The 5th one is around the single source of truth. I'll go back to the diagram that we talked about in the digital experience earlier. Single source of truth means you have to have things that are in a managed state. We can't have data stored all over the place. We can't have it unmanaged. We can't have it, we have to have it. We have to be very focused in terms of how we classify it, the hierarchies, and the overall cataloging of how that data is structured. And then ultimately, we want to be focused on improving the time to value. And so when we come up with new ideas or new capabilities, or we come up with a new process through the KCS activity, we want to measure how fast we can get that, number one, identified, and number two, out to a global audience. And so we're very focused in terms of what that is, and then we utilize that in terms of a communications tool to go back to our teams to talk to them about how we're driving those improvements, creating that investment priority, and then really using it as a competitive advantage in the marketplace. Last but not least, want to give you guys just some, kind of feedback in terms of what we've seen through the implementation of KCS and our knowledge management strategies. Again, we're on year 3 of a 5-year journey, so we still have a long way to go and things to push out, not only just within the support space, but also tying these linkages of data and information into other data silos and other organizational silos for us to really start to exploit things like personalization strategies and getting much more proactive and predictive in our work. So you can see our strategy is really focused on right information, right time, right format that yields the right action, and ultimately getting to those measures that we're talking about: completion of purpose, customer effort scores, ultimately customer satisfaction. And just to highlight a couple of things that we have done, we've trained over 18,000 employees. We're on the march to do 50,000 by this time next year. So we've gone through KCS certifications, we've categorized and set up employment and job code capabilities and whatnot. So we'll have coaches and other knowledge managers and knowledge engineers that are going to ultimately become stewards of the KCS practice and implementation that we have. You can see we've seen a 278% growth in the utilization of a single platform for all of our agents. So now we've started to see them utilize the capabilities. They're starting to contribute. They're starting to see the impacts of that contribution, and then ultimately seeing some of the benefits that we're starting to celebrate within our culture as well. Some of the process procedures and whatnot that we've actually started to put in place. We started to look at variation across the globe in different areas. We've seen as we've consolidated those processes and we've looked at the outcomes, we've seen a 96% success rate for the initial completion of tasks in the field. That's really started to help us become much more productive in our field engineering teams. And again, it's yielding a much higher percentage in terms of our overall customer satisfaction. So we're seeing some significant growth in that. Moving over to the right, 90% virtual assistant customer satisfaction. And so when we looked at single source of truth, unified search, content management, getting into change management aspects, it really became kind of the focal point and the foundational capabilities that are driving our virtual agent technology and our experiences. So we're actually going to do over 2 million interactions with our virtual assistant, and we're going to save over 1.5 million minutes in productivity and drive search down for our other agents as we're starting to either resolve things through the virtual agent, or we're actually starting to pass relevant information to an agent that allows them to start at step 5 instead of step 1 of a resolution journey. And lastly, we've seen a massive increase in the number of knowledge assets that we have created internally, particularly in the first half of this year, and is generating a large number and amount of views and interactions with our customers. And so that interaction then also helps us to continue to refine based on different personas. So how an agent uses information and knowledge versus a field agent versus our customers and our partners. And so getting into that continuous, what we call solve and evolve loop, how we're evolving the impact of knowledge, is extremely important for us to continue to generate proof points, again, from a customer point of view, as well as from an employee perspective. So I hope some of that information's been helpful for you guys. I'm trying to stay on time. I think you guys might be a few minutes behind, but I wanted to make sure I left enough time for questions and answers. And I'm going to turn it back over to our host and see if there's any questions that I can answer.
Thank you, Bit. That was fantastic. Some really great insight there, and some incredible results through the work that you're doing there. Really, really great numbers. We've got loads of questions as you'd expect. So we are pushed for time a little bit, but we'll see what we can squeeze in over the next few minutes. I certainly, seeing that and seeing the way the industry is moving, see the way that organizations and business, everything's moving towards this more knowledge-centered sort of thing. You look at some of the latest reading around machine learning, and that now almost in a Maslow's way becomes lower than Wi-Fi. Yeah, do you know? I don't know if you've seen that sort of joke. Yeah, you've seen it. So machine learning is central strategy rather than anything else, and that's really interesting because that changes, I think, what somebody is in an organization. And it sounds as if you're on the way to that. It sounds as if you're on the way from people doing work to people who are knowledge workers or knowledge curators.
Correct.
Yeah, was that what you see in the as a result of this 3 to 5? Is that what you see is going to be the main part of what you guys do in an organization? Is it going to be about curating, learning, using that insight while all the technology is doing all the labor or the less value add work? Do you see that becoming a norm in organizations?
It has to be. It is a business imperative, and if you don't, you're not going to be around very long with respect to your competition. But I would say just one quick comment. People typically use, and I see this across the industry a lot, people typically talk about AI and ML and data science and things like that. Well, it's a great game to talk about, but if you don't understand the foundational capabilities that go into creating your ability to scale, two things. Number one, you need to catalog and organize your data, metadata strategies, taxonomies, ontologies. That's the first thing. The second thing is most of your data is stored in silos. If you're not connecting the data between the silos, you can automate and do AI and ML within your silo, but you'll never be able to connect the end-to-end experience. And it's the companies that are going to connect the end-to-end experiences. They go from sales all the way to support, all the way to asset retirement. Those are the companies that are going to be able to provide personalized experience, going to drive their cost per interaction, and they're going to drive a significant amount of loyalty and revenue as a result of that. So the misnomer is, let's just go do AI and ML. Well, there's a lot behind that and a lot underneath the water level, if you will. And you need to invest the time really to understand that in order to make it, make the impact. The other aspect is you're talking about the knowledge worker and whatnot. Yes, again, if you think about the explosion of data, you're going to see over a 50% increase in data creation just in the next 12 to 18 months. That is going to continue to explode another 50% in the next 18 months. So you're going to have all of this data coming in, why collect it if you're not going to use it? And if you're going to use it, you need to have the ability to use it efficiently and effectively. And the number of decisions, and I think I stated this earlier, the number of decisions that you have to make on a minute and second and an hourly basis will override any of your capabilities that you can do on a human aspect. So if you're not focused on creating, getting your data structured, getting your AI and ML strategies in place so that you can start automating these decisions and then moving your people up the stack, if you will, with some human supervision and helping them on the digital transformations side, you got to turn them into knowledge workers. You have to scale the bottom parts of non-value add business activities. It is a business imperative as we go forward here in the next couple of years.
And it's going to be interesting to see how quickly organizations get there.
Yes.
Some, especially when we talk about public sector, private, and when we talk about, that the third or charities, whatever. Really, really, really interesting. It's great, and it's really great to get an insight from a business leader who's doing that, actually doing that. Really interesting. We've got a number of questions, Barbara. I can't read them all. I'm really sorry, but we will pause these, I think, to bit offline. Barbara's talked about knowledge management, the value of it. She's talked about the transactions, incident, meantime to resolve, all these numbers that we traditionally sort of measure, and how that's been affected by what you've done. Now, you've shown some of that already in stats, so I don't think we need to go into too much more depth on that one. I think there's quite a bit there, but we will pause that maybe. And she also asked about quantifying baselining. It looks like you've done that too. It looks like you're performing against what you expect, which is great. There's a question with Kathy, maybe the last one then before we squeeze us in. Do your employees feel that they're under pressure to now produce content?
Well, here's what I would tell you. They're creating content today. whether it's on a SharePoint site, on a sticky note, they're sharing things in other places. And it's probably what we found. It wasn't part of our overall kind of, call center operations forecasting. But as you go around and we've walked the floors and we've seen how it happens, we have data all over the place. What the problem is, it's not centralized, it's not categorized, and we don't have an understanding of how that data is being infused into the workflow and the process. So they're creating the content today. It's a matter of identifying it and then talking to them about the benefit of what that data and that knowledge sharing, knowledge worker activity can be for them personally, and again, embedding it into the culture.
Great. We'll try and gather some more questions up, Bit, and we'll maybe, if you've got the chance, we'll pass them over maybe, and we can answer those in slow time. Yeah, if that's okay. Bit, that was fantastic. Thank you very much indeed for being part of today. It's some really great insight there from obviously a massive organization as well, and it's great to understand where you guys are going. So thank you very much indeed, Bit. Hopefully we get a chance to do this again sometime. Thank you.
Excellent. Appreciate the invite and wish everybody the best of luck. You can connect with me on LinkedIn or something if you have a question. But again, great opportunity to have a good conversation about where we're headed.
Yeah,
so thanks.
Really good, really good. Thank you very much indeed. Good stuff. Okay, so we're going to introduce our final guest of the day, a little bit later than expected. Apologies to Tanya Corsi.